Today we're going to be talking about just how we got here, with the state of gamer frustrations fanning the fires of Unreal Engine hate to downright calling developers lazy or even uneducated. If you're watching this video, then you're probably aware of this, as it won't take you very long to find a channel of someone bashing Unreal Engine, the games industry, or to find articles proclaiming its death and so on. Now, this subject might take a few videos to get through, and in order to properly tackle this one, what we're going to do is divide this topic between developers and studios/executives. Now, that's not to say these are mutually exclusive, as sometimes the lead developer is the studio head, and there's crossover among hierarchies as well. But for the sake of keeping this video organized, we're going to simplify these into groups. In addition, it's important to define developer, as it's such a generalized umbrella term. Game development is a complex business of many layers, so when I refer to developers, in this context, I'm referring to all the non-executive staff. Everyone underneath a directorial role, for example. This includes everyone from the intern doing coffee runs to the lead artists, programmers, and designers, while executives or studios refers to everyone else above them. So to my fellow gamers, my developers, what happened? And just how did we get here?
And now we're back to how did I get here?
Blame is often tossed around between devs on Epic Supply and executives greedily suckling at the teeth of shady board members, as well as everyone in between. It all seems to be a big guess, often even to the developers working on these games. I think it's also important to note that not every game in Unreal Engine 5 is an unoptimized mess. What? However, with performance standards varying between peer-to-peer, it can sometimes be difficult to find a game universally agreed upon regardless of the engine. But that's a topic for another video. Now, the complaint about unoptimized games and the Unreal Engine look have two major components. New games being released with an over-reliance on upscaling and frame generation certainly doesn't help. And Unreal Engine's default film at tone mapper and lighting doesn't really lend itself broadly to any unique look, barring a shift in genre. But there's another component I want to talk about. The shift from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, and just what that means. So one answer in regards to the developers is quite simple. Developers are only just now getting a foothold on proper workflows and pipelines in Unreal Engine 5. And the games being released today are the early adopters of Unreal Engine 5. If Unreal Engine 5 were a game itself, these recent releases could be considered early access. Now this might seem like an overly simplistic answer, so let's break this down a bit further. Unreal Engine 5 came out in 2022, and with it an entire paradigm shift in development pipelines and capabilities. Unreal Engine 5 wasn't just a horizontal upgrade. In fact, as any developer who's done it will tell you, porting a game from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5 can be a nightmare.
Welcome to your nightmare!
And take months. And that's because it's almost an entirely new engine. Unreal Engine 5 again came out in 2022. Today it's barely 2025. That means it's barely been 3 years, where the average game takes about 4 years to make. Meaning a lot of these games either started on Unreal Engine 4, then were ported to Unreal Engine 5, or the ones that actually began on Unreal Engine 5 began so early that devs were all still figuring out the new version, all while hastily working to get the game released. This isn't to say you shouldn't be critical or stop being upset at poorly performing games, nor is this to absolve the developers. I'm merely stating a simple fact. Developers have been learning as they go, and I would know as I'm one of them. And if you actually look for it, it's not really even that hard to see. Scour any Unreal Engine forum and you see plenty of questions of developers asking how to do this, that, or the other. And as Epic continues to roll out new features and updates at lightning speed, features which gamers expect in their games once announced, it is then up to the developers to quickly figure out how they fit within the current pipeline, how best to implement them. Thus we end up in a scenario where some games might have frame caps on console, they might rely on DLSS or FSR because regardless of how you feel about it, it does help to make up for shortcomings in development timelines and a lack of direct optimization. Now again, does this answer absolve developers of the gamers' consensus around them? Not entirely. However, I do believe it opens the door into understanding just how we got here. That's also not to say there aren't plenty of bad developers out there in general. However, I think that should be taken more on an individual basis, not a generalized one. Now to the executives. These are the people who pay the salary of the developers and the ones they answer to. And as the saying goes, he who holds the gold makes the golden rule. Now, firstly, let me say not every executive is some mustache-twirling corporate overlord, slave to board members, and shackled to the almighty dollar bill. There are, of course, some, and they tend to out themselves with greedy practices such as $70 cosmetics on a game they already charged you $70 to play in the first place. Now, those are low-hanging fruit, so we don't need to go too deeply into that. Do greedy people exist? Yes. Do some of them get positions of power? Absolutely. I would rather speak on more nuanced topics as opposed to covering the obvious. The common complaint is generally grief aimed at the AAA studios who instilled confidence and hope in us in the first place. Now, everyone has a favorite, whether you were raised on Elder Scrolls or Diablo, for example, and it's generally these developers we used to love so much who once set the golden standard of gaming, whom we critique the most now. So, what happened to them? Let us look to the philosophical thought experiment, the ship of Theseus. You have a ship, you replace some parts, perhaps many parts. When does the ship become a different ship than the one you started with? Most of the studios that became the household name behemoths of today are not the same ship that made them popular, with many or most of their progenitors having long since left them. Studios like CD Projekt Red, for example, are making a new Witcher game while their core Witcher 3 development team have formed their own studio, Rebel Wolf, and are gearing up to drop their new game. Mass Effect's original developers are now working on their own title Exodus in a new studio as well. These are just two examples, but this is happening everywhere within the industry all the time. To put it simply, the beloved games we grew up on long abandoned the talent who made them. So we find ourselves hoping for nostalgia from companies who are shells of their former selves, the proverbial ship of Theseus, with no parts of the original ship left. There have also been many mass layoffs in the industry. It's unfortunately a common practice as developers are undervalued and seen as expendable. So oftentimes developers find themselves almost nomadic, going from studio to studio, never quite settling into any one place. The Golden Age of Gaming was the Golden Age of Gaming because the studios were led by the developers, not corporate suits who saw game development as a booming industry. No, they were passion-driven nerds like you and I who just wanted to make something cool. Now, however, these studios have reduced themselves merely to brands. Brands with names that hold value among gamers. Value they try milking with sequel after sequel after sequel. So it's no wonder when we look at comparatively newer studios that are becoming beloved, such as From Software, Larian, and Warhorse, and we look to their leadership, they're all developers, not corporate suits trying to use their studio as another name on their Wall Street portfolio. The reason, for example, why Dragon Age Veilguard wasn't as well received or commercially profitable as previous titles could be boiled down to simply that the Veilguard developers were trying to make a Dragon Age game from their own perspective of what Dragon Age is and should be, as opposed to making the next natural sequel in the story. It's essentially fan fiction masquerading as the real thing. There are good games, good studios, and great developers working on games right now. How they perform, their frame rates, DLSS or not, all of that will be topics of discussion, I'm sure, but we'll take them one by one as they come. In addition, pipelines, workflows, and proper utilization of Unreal Engine 5 is speeding along, with best practices being more commonly shared now more than ever between developers and studios, allowing for smoother transitions into using Unreal Engine 5. So what this means is more optimal gameplay is soon to follow. Also, the teams who developed the beloved games of old are seemingly catching their stride, as it were, with their new titles and studios popping up every day. So it's not that we won't be seeing any new good games, we just have to come to terms with the fact that those people who made games for us, those games of yesteryear who gave us bright spots of enjoyments, have changed. They're not gone though, they are returning just in a new form. The heroes we thought we were idolizing, the brands, the names, are who we have to say goodbye to. And as we can see, the clock is already nearing midnight for some of them. In any case, thank you all for sticking around. These videos can get long, and unfortunately, there's never enough time for these videos to truly go into every little detail and scenario. However, if you have questions, comments, want answers for specific cases, please comment down below so we can discuss it. In addition, feel free to join the Discord, where we can speak even further on a wide array of various topics. Hope to see you there. Until then, have a good day, and I'll see you in the next one.